But if the negative outweighed the positive, he would refrain from making a decision. So as we go through this today, I want to challenge you to use that same approach as you're thinking into perhaps a new way to plan and to think about retirement planning, maybe differently than you've done up to this point. Now, the fact that you are planning for retirement, if you do have a plan in place, I first off want to congratulate you there, because the vast majority of Americans do not have a formal plan in place, and they are not actively saving for retirement in the way that they should be. So the fact that you are doing something, you should reach over and pat yourself on the back or look in the mirror and give yourself a big smile, because you are doing something the vast majority of Americans aren't, and that's planning for your financial future. Now, how you're changing or how you're planning for retirement may change as a result of hearing what I'm going to share today. Or if you're not planning or doing as much as you should be, hopefully this is going to encourage and inspire you to do more, but maybe do it a little differently than you've done up to this point. Now, let me just real quickly introduce myself. My name is John Terry. I'm the guy on the right. The beautiful lady on my left is my wife, Yuri. I'm an educator. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. And I've been working in the area of consumer education in the financial arena for well over 30 years. This is what I do, is I love to sit down with individuals like myself and talk about the very same issues and concerns that keep me awake at night, because many of those same issues and concerns are likely what keep you awake at night as well. But I wanted you to know who I was, give you an opportunity to put a face behind the voice as we go through this presentation today. Since this is not a live and in-person session, I wanted you to have an opportunity to see me, and more importantly, see my beautiful better half. I love my lady from Costa Rica, and she has been an amazing part of my life for 25 years. We have 6 children, 3 grandchildren, and at the present time, in addition to that, we have 3 dogs and a goldfish and a cat hanging out at my house. So there is never a dull moment around the Terry household. Now, let me say up front, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. So if you jumped into this presentation hoping to get some free legal or tax advice, you're in the wrong place. I have been involved again in the financial services arena as an educator for a long, long time. And so I want to share some general information today that I think is going to be beneficial to you. Now, I just recently celebrated in April of this year, I celebrated the 30th anniversary of my 29th birthday. It's a standing joke around my house with my kids that I refuse to get old. And so when I turned 29, I quit having birthdays and I started having anniversaries of my birthday. So being 59, I'm in that boomer generation on the tail end of it. And as I look at what's going on and I talk to individuals that I graduated with, individuals that I've had an opportunity to work with and speak to over the years, it's been interesting at the number of events that I've done for consumers over the years, talking about various aspects of financial planning, retirement planning, and estate planning, that the things that keep people awake at night really hasn't changed. Today, just as we were 10 years ago and 20 years ago, people are still concerned about outliving their income. This even more so as medical technology is allowing us to live longer and giving us an opportunity to really see retirement become a third of our lifetime and not just a few years after we finish working. People continue to be concerned about inflation. They continue to be concerned about long-term care. They continue to be concerned about how they're going to pay for health care and medical costs going forward. There's fears related to Social Security. There's fears related to how do I leave a legacy and make sure that I'm taking care of my kids, my grandkids, my surviving spouse, and that I'm going to be remembered and that all of the things I've accumulated get passed on to the next generation in an efficient manner. These are the issues that I hear time and time again in Q&A sessions that come up, and we're going to address a handful of those today. Now, in a prior education event I did, and you can go back to the financial professional that invited you, I recently did for several of them an event called Yes, You Can Retire Happy and Stay That Way, where I addressed even a few more of these issues. So if you'd like to get an on-demand copy of that, be sure and ask them for the opportunity to hear that message as well. But, you know, we're really facing a crisis here in America today. As I was putting this slideshow together and updating it, the U.S. debt was sitting at $24.7 trillion. As I look at the debt clock today, the U.S. debt clock, at the time I am presenting this to you live and we're recording it, we're currently today sitting at just over $27 trillion in debt as a nation. We have unfunded liabilities in excess of $122 trillion. Those are financial commitments that we as a country have made that are not currently funded, and there's not money in the bank to pay for those. And if the tax revenue is not there, then those entitlement benefits such as Social Security and Medicare are not going to be really funded and being able to fulfill their obligations to the American consumer. Two examples of that you see there on the screen. According to the recent numbers today, we are looking at the Social Security Trust Fund being essentially what we call broke in 2035. That means if nothing changes by 2035, there will only be enough money coming into Social Security to pay about 75 cents of every promised dollar in benefits to consumers. So we're going to have to make some fundamental changes in how we manage Social Security. And because of this pandemic, we've still got a significant number of people that are unemployed and out of the workforce, although those numbers are improving. Now, we do have some other major issues in America that we're dealing with today. The highest marginal tax rate that we're dealing with is 37%. We have a unique thing I want to take just a moment to talk about, and that's boomer inflation. Because when we think about inflation, most of us think about the number we hear on the news, which is currently running around 1% based upon how inflation is measured at the government level. But there's a secondary inflation rate you need to be aware of, and that's the boomer inflation rate. Now, what is that? Boomer inflation rate is a measurement of the goods and services typically bought by people in retirement. And one of the things that we are seeing is that the goods and services that we are going to be spending money on as we transition into retirement are increasing faster than the general inflation rate. As a result of that, the boomer inflation rate is currently setting at just over 3% a year. Now, we've already talked about Social Security and that being essentially insolvent in 2035. Medicare, that's going to pay our health expenses as we get older, in 2032 is also going to be technically insolvent, meaning they're only going to be able to pay about 70 to 75 cents of every promised dollar in benefit. So that's another issue that fundamentally and structurally is going to have to be addressed by those that are governing our nation. And then the Medicaid program that funds programs for underprivileged individuals, there's funding issues with that as well. So we as a nation are going to have to come to grips with the fact that we are getting older, and that as this older generation expands and begins to look to the nation that they have paid into this tax structure for all of their working years and expecting to receive the benefits they've been promised, some fundamental changes in how that's going to be funded are going to have to be addressed. But if we look at a survey that was done by LIMRA, the Secure Retirement Institute, just a few years ago, asking about the three major concerns of retirees today, what they called senior Americans, those 55 and older, number one, the state of the economy was the number one concern. Number two, having enough money to last no matter how long I live was number two. And number three, the ability to remain financially independent. And in the event I get sick and can't manage my own affairs, how am I going to make sure that the money is going to be there to pay for me so that I don't have to rely on the family or the government to do so? But interestingly enough, out of this same study, only 20% of the Americans that were surveyed in this poll said they were confident that they were going to be able to live the lifestyle that they desired in retirement. They were unsure if they had saved enough money. They had never stopped to count the cost of really identifying how much money they needed to save every single month to be able to have the money guaranteed on a consistent basis when they got ready to retire, that they would have that sustainable income that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Now, if you think about the fact, and I mentioned it earlier, we're living longer than any previous generation. Today, a male age 65 can expect to live to just over 84 years of age, a female 87. Now, interestingly enough, if they are married, husband and wife, the female tends to outlive the male by an average of 5 to 7 years. Now, my wife gets a big kick out of it when I share this statement because she says, John, there's finally going to come a time in life that I'm going to get to go spend your money. And at the end of the month, I don't have to show you the credit card bill for what I spent. I get a big laugh out of that. But realizing that we are living longer, that means the money that we're accumulating today that we're going to be using if we're not yet retired, or whatever money we've got left if we're already retired, it's going to have to last a long time. And in fact, 1 in 4 of you listening to this conversation that we are having today in this message I'm sharing, 1 in 4 of you are going to live to at least the age of 90. And one of the fastest growing segments of our economy today, we look at demographically, it is people over the age of 100. Because of medical advances in medical technology and the fact that we are learning to take better care of ourselves and make healthier lifestyle choices, we are living longer. And as a result of that, the money we've saved or are saving is going to have to last longer than many of us thought about. Of course, there's healthcare concerns, and something I hear over and over as I speak to consumers like myself that are getting closer to that age that we're trying to decide, do we wade into retirement slowly like walking into a creek or a pond, or do we just get to the top of the cliff, hold our nose and dive in and hope for the best and that there's enough water there to support us and that we don't go crashing to the bottom? Now, here's an alarming fact. Healthcare cost in retirement, we're going to spend per person during a typical retirement from age 65 to death, $285,000 in healthcare costs. That's Medicare premiums that we're going to be paying, out-of-pocket expenses, and other dollars out of our pockets to pay for healthcare, not counting the cost of long-term care. In the event that we become disabled or we have Alzheimer's or some other issue that requires custodial care at home, just chronic care issue, I'm sorry, not chronic care, but critical care issues, $285,000. Now multiply that times 2. That's a significant amount of money that we need to think about today as it comes to retirement. And 7 out of 10 of us, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, are going to experience a long-term care event before we die. The average tenure of a long-term care event today is 3 to 5 years, unless it's Alzheimer's or dementia related, and then it's typically 4 to 8 years or up to 12, with a life expectancy now of anywhere from 12 to 20 years from diagnosis to death. We are seeing some significant shifts. Now, there's a lot of other stressors that we deal with, and I'm not going to take the time to go through all of those. You can see those as a screen that they go up. But there's a lot of issues going on right now that are keeping a lot of us awake at night. And these stressors all have financial implications on us, especially as we get near or we decide to enter in to retirement. Now, I haven't shared all that just to depress you, but I wanted to get you realizing that all of the things that are going on in the world around us do have a financial impact on here we are. But many of us have gotten to the point where we are today in our savings because of conventional wisdom. My uncle, Uncle Doc as we called him, was a CPA, and he espoused what he called the best way to retire. And it's something many of us have heard over our careers. John, you need to maximize your 401k and your IRA contributions. You need to put as much money away for retirement in that 401k and that IRA contribution as you can, because you get a tax deduction for putting money in, and then that money gets to grow until you get ready to take it out. The second piece of conventional wisdom says nothing outperforms the stock market. And if you're going to grow money for the long haul, the only place to really grow wealth is in the stock market. Again, conventional wisdom speaking. And number 3, there's safety through diversification. The old story of don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So if you're going to invest in the stock market, don't just buy one stock, buy different stocks. If you're going to invest in one industry, don't just invest in telecommunications or healthcare or leisure or technology. Invest in a variety of those. Again, conventional wisdom speaking. And conventional wisdom number 4 is this: if you don't take a risk, you can't make money. Because if you're not willing to take a risk, you're not going to give your money the opportunity to grow and see the success as it may see. Now, I can't see your hands today because we're not in a room together, but I'm sure many of you are nodding as I've had an opportunity to talk through those, because that's been the conventional wisdom that you heard from your CPA, from Uncle Bob, from Aunt Mary, whoever in your family has given you advice on savings. Maybe it's a coworker or someone you work with or a financial professional that has shared some things with you about conventional wisdom. And maybe that's how you started down this path to saving for retirement. Well, I want to share with you something my uncle learned later on in life, and it's something I've been speaking about now for nearly 3 decades, and that's the fact that conventional wisdom can be wrong. You know, later on in my uncle's life, when he looked back, he said, John, if I could go back to every one of my clients that I gave those 4 rules that I shared with you, and I could go back and change that wisdom, they could have a different and potentially better financial outcome. And he regretted some of the conventional wisdom strategies that he followed that he was taught in school. But as he learned more about new and different ways to plan, that became something important to him. And it's something I've continued on in the conversations and stories that I've shared as an educator over many years. Now, a lot of us growing up were told that if we could come up with a magical number that conventional wisdom says that you need to retire and be comfortable, what is that number? And if you were to ask yourself that question, what is the magic number, Ellen, that you need to have, according to conventional wisdom, to retire and to be comfortable? You know, we all have a number. But for many individuals, when I ask this in a group setting, the common answer seems to be $1 million. If I can just save $1 million and create $1 million in my retirement plan, I'm going to be good for the rest of my life. Well, let's take a look at conventional wisdom and what happens with $1 million if we follow the conventional way to save. Let me introduce you to Sean. This is a fictitious couple that I want to use to give you a story of what could happen if you follow conventional wisdom and get you thinking perhaps about a different way to save. Now, Sean has just graduated from college, and he finally met the girl of his dreams, his high school sweetheart, and they decided to get married. Sean got a great job after college and went to work for a traditional business, and as a result of that, he wanted to follow the conventional wisdom he got from Uncle Bob. And he wants to retire at age 65 with $1 million in his 401k. That's an ambitious goal for Sean and his beautiful wife to be able to pursue. So the question is, who really benefits from tax deferral? Whose $1 million plan is it going to end up being at the end of the day? Now, I want to challenge you to follow me over the next few minutes as I lay out some assumptions, and then we do some basic math to see who really wins in this tax-deferred retirement game. So here are the assumptions. Let's assume that Sean is going to be investing $6,000 a year for the next 40 years of his working career. Let's assume he's going to be investing in the stock market, and he's going to average 6% a year in his investment returns over that 40-year period of time. Now, Sean is paying 25% in federal taxes, and he's also paying a state tax rate of 5%, so 30% combined federal and state taxes. Now, every year that Sean is going to make a contribution to his 401k, he's going to get a $1,800 tax deduction. So over 40 years, Sean is going to save $72,000 in taxes by investing $6,000 a year in his 401k, earning on average 6% a year, and again, considering a 30% combined tax bracket. Remember that number or write it down, $72,000. Now, in 40 years, if we do the math, in 40 years, the money that Sean has contributed with that growth of 6% a year, Sean is going to have $1 million in his 401k at age 65, that money growing on a tax-deferred basis. So conventional wisdom up to this point has worked for Sean. And now Sean has this brilliant idea He wants to live off the interest. He's going to leave the money in the same investment, assuming it's still going to earn 6% a year. So he's looking at retiring with $60,000 a year in annual interest. That, on top of his Social Security that he's going to be receiving, is going to be an attractive sum of money that he and his beautiful wife can live off on. But now Sean realizes, I've got to pay taxes on that money. Well, as we saw, looking back earlier, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of our entitlement programs are in trouble because of $122 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So in this example, when Sean gets ready to retire, thinking his taxes were going to go down, Sean has seen a shift in the government's plan, and now Sean finds himself paying the same taxes in retirement he paid during his working years. So Sean is now taking out $60,000 a year, and he's paying 30% in taxes. That's $18,000 a year in taxes. So his net income is $42,000. That's still not bad. But I want you to think about that $18,000 tax number that Sean is going to be paying every single year for the rest of retirement. And let's do the math. In 4 years after Sean retires, $18,000 times 4, what do we have? Sean has repaid in taxes the equivalent of the tax savings that he received over 40 years of saving. So in just 4 years of retirement, Sean gave back all of the tax savings that he received over 40 years of making contributions, plus paying taxes on all of those earnings. And if Sean lives to 85, which is life expectancy, guess what? $18,000 a year times 20 years, Sean is going to be paying $360,000 in taxes by following conventional wisdom. So think about that. Sean saved $72,000 over 40 years of work in order to pay $360,000 in taxes over 20 years of retirement. And then Sean dies and leaves the remainder of the money to his wife. She continues to take the $60,000 a year, continues to pay the taxes on the interest, and then leaves the money to the children. Because of the new tax laws that we're under today, the kids have to take all of that money out within 10 years, and all of that money becomes taxable to the children. So we don't know the full ramifications of how much money Uncle Sam actually benefited from following traditional wisdom. So my question is, who really gained the most from tax deferral? Was it Sean and his lovely wife, or was it Uncle Sam? I think if you look at the numbers, you can pretty much draw the conclusion that Uncle Sam, using conventional wisdom, can inadvertently become a primary recipient of the money that you've saved that you could be using to live on in retirement. Now, when we think about different types of investments that are out there, there are what we call taxable investments, as if you were to go, let's say, open up a CD at the bank. If you open up a traditional CD at the bank, you can't deduct your deposit. The money doesn't grow tax deferred, and you're going to pay taxes on those earnings every single year. But the good news is there's no taxation when you withdraw. Now, if you use a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k or even a non-qualified insurance annuity, can you deduct your deposit with an IRA, with a 401k? Yes. With a non-qualified annuity? No. But all three of those are going to grow on a tax-deferred basis. However, if you've got money that you're going to be putting into a tax-deferred investment like an IRA or a 401k, all of the money comes out on the back end, and it's taxable. Because if you get a deduction on the front end, all of that money coming out on the back end is going to be taxable. Now, on the other hand, what if we were to discover a handful of financial investments that are available today and strategies you could use that would allow you to have tax-free money in retirement? You can't deduct your deposits into those accounts on the front end, but the money is going to grow on a tax-deferred basis. And when the money comes out on the back end, there are no taxes due as long as you follow the rules. So I guess the question is, are you interested in learning more about taxable or tax-deferred or tax-free options as it comes to planning for retirement? Because it's important to remember that when you get ready to retire, the money that comes out of your retirement savings account is either going to be taxable dollars that you're going to be giving up part of that to Uncle Sam, or it's going to be tax-favored or tax-free money that you get to keep more of it or all of it and not have to pay taxes on it today. And another important thing to remember is that depending on the amount of money that you earn above and beyond your Social Security check, up to 85% of your Social Security payments can be taxed. So if you can have tax-free money that doesn't impact your Social Security check or cause it to have to be taxed, maybe having tax-favored income in retirement is something you need to give consideration to if you haven't up to this point. So when we think about tax-free income, what are some options? Well, one could be investing in municipal bonds. Now, they do offer a low rate of return, and depending on the state that you buy them in and the state that you live in, there could be some state taxes that may be imposed, and municipal bonds are going to be added into the calculation to determine whether or not your Social Security is going to be taxable. Of course, there's a Roth IRA. Now, with a Roth IRA, you've got to wait till you're at least 59 and a half to be able to pull money out. Contributions into a Roth, you've got to wait 5 years before you can take the money out so that it can come out tax-free. But the downside of a Roth is the fact that there are limited contributions on an annual basis in terms of how much that you can invest every year to grow wealth for retirement. Now, Social Security, if it's the only source of income you have, or you've got income that is tax-free, that is a guaranteed source of income in retirement. But if you make too much money, depending on where you live and what your current tax status is, again, that Social Security may be partially or fully taxable as additional income. Now, Tom Hegna, in his book Paychecks and Playchecks, says there are 11 critical years in retirement. And I want to touch on those. He says the 5 years before you retire, the year you retire, and the 5 years immediately after you retire are the most critical years in retirement. Why? Because time becomes an enemy. Think back to the people in 2001 and in 2008 that had their money in the market and went through those major market corrections. I think into some individuals that I talked to that were getting ready to retire in 2001. And their 401k became a 201k overnight because they lost 50% of their money in the market in that major correction. And so they worked from 2001 to 2008, saving to earn back the money they had lost, only to lose half of it again in 2008. Many of them that had planned to retire in 2001 continued working another 8, 10, or 12 years to earn back the money that they had lost. Otherwise, they were going to be retiring on 50 cents on the dollar. Why? Because again, conventional wisdom, they were looking at traditional investing. Now, what is traditional investing? That's where you have an opportunity to invest directly in a mutual fund, directly in the stock market, where you have an opportunity to earn all of the upside of the market, but at the same time, you get to participate in all of the downside of the market. Well, one of the new strategies we've really seen come into play over the last decade, and really over the last 4 or 5 years, it's gotten a lot of attention, and that is index strategies, where an index strategy creates a variation of traditional investing that it gives you the opportunity to enjoy some of the upside, but none of the downside. So think about that. I could invest in traditional investing, and if the market goes up 20%, I make 20%. If the market drops 20% the next year, I lost 20%. If the market dropped 40% the next year, I lost 40. And that up and down yo-yo roller coaster is great when you're young and you've got time for the market to work. But as you get older, you don't have time to recover if the market takes a downturn. So what if you could give up some of the upside to have the protections that if the market goes down, you're not going to lose what you've made, You're just not going to earn any type of credit that year, but you get to keep what you've earned up to that point. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. This is a graph that we put together looking at the S&P 500, the red chart that you see, or the red line that you see on the graph through the first quarter of 2020. The blue line represents money in a 2% interest rate, fixed interest investment that you could pick, again, hypothetical. And then the green line represents an indexing strategy where if you were to invest in an S&P 500 index strategy, you would get 40% of the upside. But in the event the market went down, as you can see there in 2008, the strategy doesn't go down, you just don't get a credit that year. And you can see over time how that an indexing strategy in certain market conditions can give you a good competitive outcome as compared to having money directly in the market. And if you think into those 11 critical years that Tom talked about in his PBS special on paychecks and playchecks, it's important to consider that when you're young, time is your ally. But as you get older, it becomes an enemy. So the question for all of us is, as we get ready to retire, can we afford having all of our money in the market so that it's subject to the whims of the market and the money that we're counting on to be there for the rest of our lives, however that long that may be in retirement? Can we really take the risk of having that much risk when there are other strategies out there that could give us protections that could assure that we've got guaranteed income for the rest of our lives? So one of the questions I've often asked groups as I've had a chance to be with them is, I've said, if you could design an ideal tax-free solution that you could put money into today, not necessarily getting a tax deduction on the front end, but have an opportunity to get money out on the back end tax-free, what would that look like? So if you could take a wish list and kind of do the Ben Franklin thing and create a list of things that would be something that you would want to see in that product, here's what I've heard from consumers time and time again. John, I'd love the opportunity to have an ideal tax-free solution I could put money into that allow me to make unlimited contributions. I wouldn't be restricted to whatever the Roth limits are today, and I could invest as much as my pocketbook would allow. Number two, I want to make sure that that money grows on a tax-deferred basis so that the money I put in is earning an interest rate or earning some type of credit. The money that I would have paid in taxes is going to continue to grow and to give me an opportunity to see my wealth accumulate. And the earnings that I grow can stay in there and continue to grow without being impacted by taxes. But John, not only do I want an unlimited contribution opportunity and do I want tax-deferred growth, I also want the ability to take the money out, income, tax-free. And on top of that, I don't want to have RMD, required minimum distribution obligations, that I have under my 401k and my IRA. With an IRA or a 401k, when you get to the age of 72, whether you need to start taking money out of that account or not, Uncle Sam holds his hand out and says, that money has been tax deferred long enough, and you are going to have to begin to take out a minimum amount of money every single year for the rest of your life so you can begin to pay Uncle Sam what is due Uncle Sam, even if you don't need the money. I remember the first time my dad got an RMD letter from one of his mutual funds he had some money invested in, and he calls me and he says, what do you mean I've got to start taking money out of this IRA? I don't need that money yet. I'm saving that money for later in retirement. Why do I have to start taking it now? So I had to talk my dad off the ledge and have the conversation and explain required minimum distributions. What if you could have a plan that didn't have that? What if you had a plan that if you decided to create a bunch of wealth and retire at 50, you didn't get penalized for taking money out of your retirement plan early? With an IRA or with a 401k or even with a Roth, if you take money out prior to 59 and a half, unless you meet a very narrow definition of exemptions, you're going to pay a penalty on taking money out. But what if there was an ideal tax solution you didn't have to? What if I could have market-linked returns, that I could participate in the upside of the market to a certain level, but I had no downside exposure, so I would be protected against market loss? What if I could have a plan that I'm making contributions to, John, that in the event I die early, the plan self-completes and provides money for my surviving spouse, my kids, and my grandkids? Now, what if I wanted to use my IRA or my 401k money to fund it? What if there was a way that I could use some of the earnings inside of this account to help pay the taxes if I were to begin to take money out of an IRA or a 401k and invest them in a strategy like this? I'd love to be able to use some of that money to help offset the taxes. And lastly, whatever I don't spend in retirement, John, I want that money to go to my heirs, income tax free. So if you could design the ideal tax-free solution, I believe many of you listening to me today would say, that's what I'm looking for. I would love a solution just like that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are financial solutions that offer some or all of these provisions that are available to you right now. And the financial professional that invited you to come and hear me speak can share with you different strategies that you can implement some or all of these unique features in a very unique type of retirement planning instrument. So let me ask if this is what you're looking for or not. Are you looking for tax-free income in retirement? Would you like to have something that's going to give you a predictable rate of return over time, that's also going to provide you with principal protection from market loss? If so, you need to have a conversation at the end of our time today with the financial professional that invited you here to hear me share, because they can share with you a unique strategy or several strategies that you may want to consider so that one or all of these opportunities could be afforded to you. Now, whether you're looking to get to retirement in a hurry, or you're loading everything up that you've got and you're just going to take your time getting there, or you want to just jump on the motorcycle and cruise through retirement, whatever you want to do, there are unique planning strategies that are available to you that can allow you to defy conventional wisdom, to tell Uncle Sam you are no longer going to be a major recipient of the money that I'm saving for retirement, because I would prefer that that money be available for me and my family to spend rather than to give it to Uncle Sam for him to spend or to squander, depending on where that money may go. Now, if given the choice between taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free, I think many of you listening to this message today would say, you know, I've got some taxable money. I'm in a 401k or an IRA, so I've got some tax-deferred money, but I need to have a tax-free conversation and understand more about the strategies I could employ to make this happen for me. That's what the financial professional that invited you to hear me share can do for you. And it reminds me of that movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where he worked his way through the challenges and he encroaches upon the night in the cave. And as he looks around him and he's trying to figure out of all of the cups in the cave, which one of those cups is the mysterious Holy Grail, that night turns to him and says, you must choose, but choose wisely. That is important, because how you choose to save for retirement is going to determine whether or not you're going to be paying Uncle Sam more or less from the dollars that you're putting aside today. Now, that's where the financial professional that invited you here says, hey, I can help you with this. I can give you an opportunity to look at alternatives maybe you have not looked at that might be important to you. But at the end of the day, it's a personal decision. But you need to know what your options are, and you need to know what you don't know, because it's only then that you can make an informed decision that's going to allow you to choose what works best for you. And every person's financial situation is differently. So what works for one client may not work for another. And that's where personalizing your plan and working with a knowledgeable financial professional is so very, very important. But at the end of the day, you've got to know what your options are. You know, I like to say it often, is the fact that because you don't know what you don't know, you're making decisions with, at best, incorrect or incomplete information. And the more information we can have, the better the decision that we can make. And you're making decisions with your most important asset, and that's your money. Because the money you save today and the amount of a net money that you have after you pay Uncle Sam what is due him, that's all you've got to live on for the rest of your life in retirement. And if you can structure your retirement in such a way that you pay the least amount legally possible, that leaves more money for you and your family to enjoy the retirement you've always dreamed of. So that's where the financial professional that invited you to this event raises their hand right now and says, I'd like to have a conversation with you. And here's what they would propose that you do with them at the end of our time together today. To sit down and take a few minutes in a complimentary review to evaluate what you're doing right now and to make sure if what you're doing is going to work as planned. They can walk you through the analysis to look at you and say, here is the financial outcome if you keep doing what you're doing now and nothing changes. At the same time, they can share with you some different and unique solutions that maybe you want to consider, that you could add to what you're doing now, or maybe stop what you're doing now and consider going a different path to save in a different way so that you've got money coming from tax-deferred money, taxable money, and tax-free money to see how different solutions and different planning strategies could uniquely benefit you. And ultimately to determine for you if there's a better and more efficient way for you to be funding your retirement so that you can have the best possible outcome that's available for you and your family. And by the way, this initial meeting with the individual that invited you here cost you nothing but a few minutes of your time. And in fact, they are willing to do something special just as a way to say thank you for spending some time with them. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So my promise to you is this, because I know in my own personal career as a financial professional, I used to tell this to all my clients, that by the time we would spend together, you're going to know, number one, whether or not the strategies that I would be sharing with them and that the financial professional that invited you here is going to be sharing with you, you're going to know if those strategies work. You're going to know how the strategies that they're going to recommend are going to financially benefit you, or whether they won't. You will be able to have that understanding. And thirdly, whether or not one of the tax-free solutions that they might recommend for you makes good sense for you and your unique situation. I made that promise to my clients when I was in personal production several years ago. I left that to be an educator, to speak to people just like you and myself about these issues. But I know that the financial professional that invited you here, this is the way they do their practice. Now, the last thing I want to have happen is for you to listen to me share today and walk away saying, yeah, I'll get to that sometime, but I'll do that another day. I don't want you to be like a lady that attended one of my events years ago, and I presented some solutions back in a group with some people I grew up with. And one of the ladies there that had kind of been an extra mom to me was in the room. And I shared some solutions on retirement planning and estate planning. And she patted me on the head as she did when I was a little boy and thanked me for my talk. And she says, yeah, I need to do that one day. Well, one day became one day too late when she got sick and she didn't get well. And because of a failure to plan, they began to have to sell off the family farm 1 acre at a time to pay for her care. And a family farm that had been in the family for generations ended up being disrupted and almost completely destroyed because of a lack of planning. Please don't be one of those that says, hey, this was great information, but I'll deal with this later. Don't be the one that looks back 5 years from now, having run out of money, or having left all your money in the market and experiencing a downturn, and now you've got 50 cents of the dollar or whatever that may turn out to be, and you look back and say, if only I had taken that few minutes to meet with the advisor that asked me to come to this event just to see what my options could have been, could I have had a different outcome? If you know the information, you can make an informed decision if it's right for you. So as we wrap up, I want to say thank you for being with us. The financial professional that invited you to this event welcomes an opportunity to schedule a complimentary 30-minute visit with you. As a result of meeting together with them, they're going to give you some options. They're going to offer to take you to lunch or dinner if in whatever part of the country you're in, you're able to get out and do that, and you're comfortable doing that with them. Or if not, they could have Grubhub or Uber Eats or some other delivery service deliver food to your house, and y'all could have a conversation on the phone or over Zoom or some other type of video technology. Or you guys could meet in a convenient location, and they could just share with you a gift card to your favorite restaurant just for taking 30 minutes out of your time to talk about what we've discussed today and discuss whether or not any of these options might benefit you and your financial situation. I again want to say thank you to the financial professional that invited you to attend this event. For those of you that are hearing me live, thank you for being with me. Thank you for taking the time to educate yourself and to learn some new things. And I hope this has opened your eyes to a new way of thinking, and that it's okay to challenge conventional wisdom, because conventional wisdom can sometimes be wrong. And it's sometimes that out-of-the-box thinking that can create new, better, and more innovative ways to save and to create an opportunity for a better financial outcome. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we all want, the best financial outcome for ourselves and our family that we can create through working with a trusted financial professional. My name is John Terry. I want to thank you for being with us. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your week.